Astrophysicists, beware! In this episode of The Russell Brown Show, you will need to suspend your disbelief during the entirety of this presentation, because I'm going to create a simulation of a solar eclipse on the planet Earth. I'm going to use Adobe Photoshop CS4's new capabilities for animating 3D objects. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover some of these new features. Our story actually begins with this image right here, which is in fact actually a QuickTime movie. If I click right here inside of Adobe Bridge CS4, I can play the movie directly inside this window. You can see that the graphic moves from left to right and wraps around on itself. So I'm going to take this QuickTime movie and bring it into Photoshop. So let's get started and switch over to Photoshop right now. As you can see here inside of Adobe Photoshop, I've taken that moving map image that we just saw and imported it into my document as a layer right here. If I select my spacebar key now, you can see that the animation appears here. So I have a video animation imported into Adobe Photoshop CS4 as a movie because, of course, we support QuickTime movies inside of CS4. Let's go up here to my 3D menu right here, and let's take a movie and turn it into a 3D shape. So going down here to New Shape from Layer, I'm going to go right over here to Sphere. It's that simple. I'm going to hit my spacebar key now to play this. Check that out. I have a 3D sphere that has a movie on it. So I'm not rotating the sphere, I'm simply playing a movie on top of any 3D object simply and easily just by going up to the 3D menu and turning the movie into a 3D object. What a great feature. Now I want to bring in some sunlight. Over here in this panel right here, the 3D scene panel, I'm going to go over here and click on this icon right here for Filter by Lights. I can go in and add any number of lights to this. By default, there are 3 different light sources applied to this 3D object. But a great feature over here in the flyout menu is the ability to replace these lights with lights that you've predefined earlier. And I can replace my lights. In fact, I could even add new lights or delete lights. In this case, I want to replace all of the lights in this default set with a set that I've created earlier. By selecting Replace Lights, I can then select, in this case, my space lights that I created and load them. It then applies all of the settings for those lights for me. And once again, let's close this down and hit my spacebar key, and you can see I have my spinning Earth in the lighting of my space adventure. Okay, now, where's the moon? The moon is here as a separate layer right here. I'm turning it on here in my Layers panel. It's a flat 2D planet. It, of course, wraps around on itself. Again, selecting a 2D layer, I can go to the 3D menu and down here to New Shape from Layer. Right over here to Sphere. So I'm going to have 2 identical spheres, the moon and the Earth. When doing a project like this, I'm ultimately going to merge these 2 together so they work as one planetary system. But when I do any move or adjustment to planetary bodies in space, I must use the tools found here in the tool panel. These are the 3D tools that must be used in order to keep them in the same space. You'll see here in a moment. The first thing I want to do is to scale the moon using this tool right here. If I click and drag toward the center of the moon, I can start to scale the moon down, just like this. Of course, I am not doing this to accurate celestial scale. So keep that in mind, this is just a simulation. So I've scaled the moon down just there. Now, again, I'm going to select this tool, the 3D pan tool, to move it over. I'm holding down the Shift key to constrain this, and I'm going to move it out here into space like this. Keep in mind, I'm using these tools because you are tempted to use the Move tool on this particular layer, but that will not be recorded in space and time. You must use these tools so that the two work together. Okay, now I want to scale the Earth up a little bit. I'm going to target the Earth layer here in my Layers panel. And once again, select the 3D Scale tool. Click and drag away from the Earth like this to increase the size just like this. So I now have a simulated relationship between the size of the Earth and the Moon. Now we start the animation. To do that, I need to merge these two 3D objects together. And since I used these tools, the 3D tools here from the tool panel, I know that when I select both of these, holding down the Shift key, I'm selecting the Earth and the Moon together. I can go up to my 3D menu and down here to Merge 3D Layers. Now watch the Moon especially, because the Moon is hovering above the Earth in the layer stack. It's now